That morning of the 29th, a rocket landed very near my trailer, and I about got flown out of bed. I reported to the ambassador. I said, well, what do you want me to do now? And he said, you're the only group that has recognition by the North Vietnamese as having diplomatic immunity. The North doesn't recognize me or the embassy or any other Americans as having any right to be here. You get your people and go down to the embassy and set up an office, and I'm going to call the final evacuation, and we're all leaving, and you're going to stay. So I could just visualize myself standing at the embassy gate with my little card that said, you got to guarantee my privileges and diplomatic privileges and immunities to some little North Vietnamese soldier that shows up at the gate with an AK-47, you know. My name is John Madison. I was born on September 22nd, 1927. I served in the Army for 32 years. In 1974, I was sent as a negotiator with the North Vietnamese. And while I was there, the war came to an end, and I got involved in the evacuation of Saigon. Beginning after World War II, Vietnam was split in half, and the communists took over the north part. The South Vietnamese population was in a panic because when the North Vietnamese took over the north, they had killed 1 million people up there. And the South Vietnamese government was saying, we have to resist them, we have to fight because they're going to kill us all. The north got Saigon surrounded by the middle of April. The city was impacted with 1 million refugees, all trying to figure out how they were going to get out of there because they could see that the end was coming. The main problem with doing any real evacuation planning was that the ambassador, Graham Martin, didn't want anybody to make any moves that would indicate to the South Vietnamese that we were going to pull out. The North Vietnamese told us that we had 24 hours to get out of there, that they were then going to launch their final attack on Saigon. There was this huge crowd forming around the embassy. Complete chaos going on. People wanted to get in and get evacuated. Not long after we got there, the deputy ambassador came down and said, well, the decision had been made to make a helicopter lift out of the embassy itself. Looked out there in the back of the embassy, and there were several thousand people packed in there at that point, all of them hysterical practically. So I was asked to go down and organize this group. We went down with bullhorns, went out into this crowd and told these people that you have to let us organize you, and we can then bring you out by helicopter load. The embassy had a fairly large helicopter pad on the roof, but it wasn't strong enough to land the larger Marine helicopters, so they had to come into the parking lot. Well, it wasn't long before helicopters started arriving, and we started stuffing people on. Sometimes we were able to add a few people, sometimes we had to take some off. So this went on for most of the day of the 29th and on into the night and into the early morning hours of the 30th of April, 1975. Finally, we had been able to secure the walls of the embassy because people were jumping over the walls, climbing over the walls, throwing babies over the walls. People outside were waving credentials and so forth. And those that were surrounding the embassy trying to get in probably had as much right to be inside as the ones who had gotten inside, but we knew we couldn't take any more out. Just before dawn was breaking on the 30th of April, we had about 450 left, and the walls had been secured, and the crowd on the outside had decided they weren't going to get in. They went home, so there wasn't anybody left trying to crawl over the walls at that point. The ambassador kept promising me that we'd get everybody out that was inside the walls, and that's what we told the people. You'll all get out. We've been promised that you'll all get out. So we thought we'd be able to lift those people out and we'd be done and the rest of us could leave then. Well, I was informed that the lift had been canceled primarily because they said the pilots couldn't fly safely anymore. They'd been flying for 24 hours straight practically. So very unfortunately we had to leave the 460 sitting there waiting very patiently. Well, naturally when we had to leave those people we were heartbroken. Very much felt betrayed. I was on about the last helicopter to leave, I guess. There was small, about a squad of Marines left on the roof. They were still burning classified documents. By then the crowd had realized they weren't going to be picked up and that the only helicopters were coming were the ones taking the remaining people off the roof. So they charged the building and charged up the stairwells, and the small group of embassy guards that were left at that point were having to throw tear gas grenades and smoke grenades down the stairwells to delay them. And then finally there was a steel door up on the roof and they were able to blockade that. So anyway, we flew out to the fleet. And I remember looking down over Saigon. All the streets were empty. All the street lights were on. The city just waiting to be captured. It wasn't but about not too many hours later that the North Vietnamese tanks rolled down the street in front of the embassy and went 2 blocks down and broke the gates at the presidential palace and took over. So I got out to the Marine helicopter ship, and I was mad as hell, and looked up the helicopter squadron commander, and I told him there were 6 loads. All we needed was 6 sorties to get the rest of the people out. And he said, well, I sure wish I'd known that, because that wouldn't have been a problem for us. So, but he'd been ordered to stand down.